All right, guys, we got some breaking news in Lincoln today. Breaking news, and that is that Tony White now going to be the defensive coordinator for the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and this is a big deal, guys. This is a big deal. Let's take 8 minutes to pretty much unpack this. So, reading about Tony White briefly before, because this is a breaking news video, Tony White utilizes the Gary Patterson system of 3-3-5, and that is having 3 down linemen, 3 linebackers, and having a lot of cornerback play. So, what you need is a very good nose tackle in the middle there. He's a 0 technique over the center, and then you're probably going to have like a couple of 3 technique, defensive tackles in that formation. You then go 3-3-5, so then you can move your linebackers that got to cover a lot of speed. These linebackers basically, your what is it actually? Your outside linebackers have to set the edge. So when they run to the edge, you got to have fast outside linebackers that can set the edge so that the running back will come inside. So then the middle linebacker is going to be the hero. He's going to be the tackling machine and get all the tackles, but it's a gaps, it's a gap scheme system. The problem is that you can, get run on pretty good if you don't have a really good nose tackle. And sometimes your pass rush might not be as effective as traditional 4 downs, but you do have more versatility as football's kind of going this way because you have 5 guys back in the secondary, so you're probably not going to be beat over the top, and you're going to basically give up less explosive plays. And this was how Matt Rhule was really successful at Baylor University in the Big 12, and he basically made the Big 12 at Baylor. When you played Baylor, you had to take your time and accumulate a lot of yardage to get up the field, and a lot of offenses really struggled from the Big 12 really adjusting to that system, because when you have a lot of defensive linemen, you play a 4-3, you get beat on the back end. When you're in cover 1 against Mike Gundy, he's going to tear you apart. So when you're playing against, Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma and even Tom Herman at Texas during that time, you needed to, in the Big 12, Iowa State, Kansas, with Brent Dearman would throw the ball all over the yard, you needed to play that style. So Tony White is from that style. Tony White didn't work with Todd Graham. He worked with Herm Edwards, so he was around some NFL guys. And then Dino Babers decided to hire Tony White as well. He has a lot of playing experience. He's very young at 43 years old, so he could be a star in the making, which I like hiring, guys with upside. And so Tony White from Florida also spent time in Arizona. So he knows recruiting angles. So he can recruit in Arizona because he was at Arizona State. He went to college at UCLA and then was a grad assistant there. So he actually played some years in the National Football League. So I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what about him. I'll tell you what about Tony White. So, sorry, just reading about this. 3-year starter at UCLA. 3-year starter. And Tony White basically went undrafted. I'm trying to figure out what position the dude played. Tony White, probably a DB, probably a cornerback. I'm just going to guess. I mean, he isn't that, big. He probably looks like he weighs, 200 pounds. So, Tony White, playing experience, and he's young. And I like this hire for Nebraska. Scott Frost hired his guy, Chenander, and Chenander was all right. But Tony White, man, he's just going to implement what Matt Rhule does, and they're going to collaborate really well. All right, so that's what Tony White's all about. Tony White, I'm sure, played defense, or what. You guys can correct me, but he was in Canada, so he wasn't a primary. He went undrafted at UCLA, but Tony White actually played at UCLA. I wonder if Freddie Mitchell knows him pretty well. Freddie Mitchell was a big-time player at UCLA during that time as well. So Tony White now going to Lincoln, Nebraska, and Syracuse football, right? That begs the question, what was Syracuse football like? So Syracuse this year went 7-5, and you remember that they were inside of they went like 5-0, and you have to remember that they were inside of the top, 15 before losing to Florida State, Clemson, before losing games on the back end of their schedule. And yes, they got bombed by Florida State. Yes, they struggled down the stretch. But the thing is, with Tony White, when he was with Herm Edwards and when he was with Dino Babers, with Herm Edwards, you would maybe get some talent in Tempe. But Syracuse is I think it's one of the hardest jobs in the ACC. You're up there you're up at a basketball school, which is what Syracuse is with Jim Boeheim. Let's call it what it is. You're playing in the Carrier Dome, and you're up there all the way towards Canada. It's really tough to get guys to commit to Syracuse. You got to scour the East Coast. You got to dominate New Jersey. That's the only way that you can really compete. And the fact that Syracuse is like 7-5, 8-4, like that's amazingly impressive. All right. Syracuse doesn't have a ton of resources. It's really hard to recruit to. There's not a lot of talent there. So it's a very, very, very hard job. And Dino Babers has done a nice job at Syracuse, making it work with patchwork. Their quarterback this year, they mostly ran the football. They had Garrett Schrader, who you remember did the helicopter spin at Mississippi State, who was a Charlotte 4-star guy. I know about Garrett Schrader, but the other parts of the roster I really don't know about that well. But now Tony White, which is a young coordinator that Matt Rhule didn't really know before, he's going outside of his sphere. Marcus Satterfield was a guy that he really trusted. He brought along the strength coach that he trusted, but now he's getting even more influence as a guy that agrees with Rhule's structure, but is also not exactly somebody connected with Matt Rhule. And that is what is interesting about Tony White and this hire. I'm liking it. I'm liking everything that Nebraska is doing so far. So Tony White, the new DC at Nebraska, really good experience, an up-and-comer in college football, 43 years old, has stops, grew up in Florida, spent time in Texas, El Paso, Texas, UCLA. He's been everywhere. He had to move a lot during his childhood. So I'm excited for Tony White. This up-and-comer did a really solid job at Syracuse when he was given the opportunity, spent some time with Arizona State, played a lot of football, even played professional football. So that's it. Tony White, man. This is kind of, out of the blue hire, but in a really good way. This is a fun hire for Nebraska football, and they're getting new influences in Lincoln, Nebraska, and Tony White agrees with Matt Rhule philosophy-wise on the 3-3-5. So what do y'all think about Tony White?